Hey everybody, welcome back to the Calibrate Tools and DIY channel. Hope everybody's doing good. Uh, I came across something like I always do. And guess what, guys? It's happening already. Just like I told you, maybe a couple of years ago, but they're doing it on a larger scale right now. What does that mean? Let's dive into it, guys. They're building houses, right? Homes with robots right now in the span of a day. Okay. Now, don't just take that as face value. What they're doing is they're building the structure of the house, the concrete walls of the house in a day with robots. Now, back when I talked about this subject, I think they were in the experimental stage, and I think they're still experimenting on some things. But now the level of experimentation has expanded into building full-scale neighborhoods this way. So what does that mean? That's going to put a lot of people out of work, right? Well, not necessarily. So don't get scared too fast, okay? Some of the tradespeople are still going to be, still going to have to do things that robots can't do. The electrical, the plumbing, and all that stuff. Still going to need human beings, okay? Putting in the windows and all that stuff, right? But this should show you guys that technology is moving so fast right now that before you know it, whole developments are going to be erected by these robots. Okay, I mean, I look outside and I see these driverless cars. We got AI and we got all this stuff, right? What does that tell you? Like I always push on this channel, you got to up your skills, right? You got to up your skills. You can't, ignore what's happening out there. So let's dive into it. Okay. It said the technology behind these 24-hour homes is a type of 3D printing at building scale. A large robotic arm moves on rails and they extrude a special type of concrete mix. Extrude means just it spits out this concrete mix, okay? Very fast. And if you ever saw an actual 3D printer, like a not for homes obviously, but for just objects like this, something like that, it's the same principle, right? It spits out a layer and then it spits out another layer on top of that and on top of that very fast. Okay. And this is how they're able to erect these houses so quickly in about a day. It says they did a trial in Texas. It says 1,500 square foot homes walls were printed in roughly 24 hours of active print time. Okay, spread over a couple of days, right? And man, it's okay. So that's basically, I mean, think about it. How long would it take for traditional construction techniques to do that? Okay, much longer than a day, right? It could take like a week. It depends on the crew. It could take a week or two. So imagine the productivity that this is going to bring to the industry. Now, what are the major reasons this is happening, that they're trying to roll out these robots to build these houses? Well, another thing I talk about a lot is the housing shortage, right? The labor shortage. So, you're not going to have people calling in sick or trucks breaking down, trying to bring the supplies. You're not going to have all those headaches to deal with the robots, okay? And to any company that can afford these robots to do it, they're going to jump on it. Now, of course, you're probably going to see the bigger companies do it because they got the capital to do this. But yeah, so if you are a mason worker or mason, right, or bricklayer or something like that, I don't know. You might have to up your skills or go into another trade so you can at least make an income, right? Another trade that's not going to be affected by by this tech coming out. All right. Okay. So yeah, it's just basically a big 3D printer. That's all it is, a gigantic 3D printer printing these houses pretty much. All right. Okay, so let's see here. How robot built homes actually change the housing game. It says at first glance, the methods look simple. They bring the printer in, they load the material, they press go, and it says what's really happening is a tightly choreographed workflow. Architects design directly for printing. So if you're an architect, you're going to have to learn this tech too. You're going to have to be able to design for these gigantic 3D printers to print these structures. Okay, so let's see here. It adjusts for curves, wall thickness, and openings so the machine can move smoothly. Engineers tweak the concrete ink to flow just right. That ink is is the actual concrete, right? They just call it ink. Not too runny and not too stiff. On the ground, technicians check alignment, they monitor temperatures, and pause the print if something looks off. Once the walls are up, trades follow. Electricians, plumbers, roofers, finishers. And the robot handles the skeleton, all right? And it says humans handle the soul. So, yeah, I mean, where's this going? It says this hybrid approach is where many first-time observers get surprised. People imagine full robot cities with no workers at all. The reality is more modest than that, okay? A housing nonprofit in Mexico, for example, partnered with a 3D printing firm to build a small community for low-income families. The robot printed the walls, but local crews did the windows, roofs, tiles, and paint. Residents got to customize small choices, a window here, a niche there, so the place didn't feel like a sci-fi project dropped from the sky. Well, you got to kind of give them some credit for that, right? They're actually, when they go to these areas and do this kind of work, they involve the community in it. And it's actually giving them jobs. So that's helping that economy in that whatever area that is, whatever part of the world they're doing it in. So that's a good thing about it. Analysts tracking these projects say the real shift isn't just speed, it's predictability. A conventional house can be delayed by rain, by missing a crew, by a truck stuck 200 miles away with your lumber. With robotic printing, a big chunk of that uncertainty disappears. Fewer moving parts, fewer surprises. Some early builds report material savings since the printer uses only what's needed and can create hollow or ribbed walls that stay strong with less concrete. That's part of why economists are starting to see this as not just a gimmick, but as a serious lever for easing housing shortages in markets where prices have sprinted away from salaries. Okay. So, this is one solution to the housing crisis. I don't know how widespread it's going to be because, these things cost and everybody can't afford it, but it's definitely at least going to make some kind of impact. But what is that going to mean for buyers and renters or cities? So let's see what it says about that. The first practical question about that is, how does it feel inside? It says early residents describe it as surprisingly normal. The printed walls can be smooth or ripped or rippled, depending on whether builders decide to leave the layered look or the skim coat look. Insulation is added. Roofs are conventional or prefabricated. Interiors look like any modern house once painted and furnished. The big difference isn't the vibe, it's the potential price tag and delivery time. In markets where waiting years for new supply is the norm, knocking weeks or months off construction schedules can be life-changing. Okay. Now, I just talked about in my last live about AI taking over project management, duties when it comes to building, and how, schedules can be just spit out in a matter of minutes versus taking weeks to do. Right. So here it is. I'm sure they're going to factor this into it as well. Right. If you're a project manager or programming an AI for project management, you will probably now have to consider 3D printed houses or, into the project management schedule, not to mention the costs and all that stuff. OK, so everything's going to be affected by this. Okay, if it expands and moves forward, which I'm sure it will. All right, so where was I? Okay, says the big difference isn't the vibe, it's the potential price tag and delivery time. In markets where waiting for new supply is the norm, you're knocking weeks and months off construction schedules. There's also a quiet psychological factor as well. Some people hear robot built and instantly think temporary. So, that's one thing about, putting a new product out, right? It may be efficient. It may do the job much faster, but you still have to get over that psychological hurdle of the public, right? They may not like it. They may think, they may not be comfortable with it. So you have to consider those things as well. So it says some people are thinking, they're, when they hear robots, they hear like temporary, or they think it's unsafe. It's saying here, builders and regulators are trying to meet that head on by stress testing the walls, getting formal approvals, and building pilot projects in real neighborhoods, not just desert labs. Now, out here in LA, they actually have developments that are built out of containers. Now, I'm in the trucking industry, and I haul when I'm in the truck, I haul a lot of containers from the ports to wherever they got to go. And they use those containers actually to build homes. And a lot of times they use it to build apartment complexes as well. And I would think that these, with the wall thicknesses of what this 3D printer is printing out, is much more sturdier than kind of almost paper thin walls of a container. Now, I don't know how they reinforce the containers, homes, walls. I'm sure they do. But, I would say, this is probably just as trustworthy as a container complex or building construction. Okay. It says builders and regulators are trying to meet this psychological hurdle head on. Like I said, by stress testing and, getting approvals and doing pilot programs. The worst mistake would be rolling out cheap, low quality bills that confirm every year. So far, the opposite is happening in well-run projects. Thick, sturdy walls, good thermal performance, and designs that can handle harsh weather. That's what I was thinking about. Like if you're building this stuff down in, say, South Florida or any area in the U.S. on the East Coast where hurricanes tend to hit, and in the past few years we had a few major ones that did a lot of damage and a lot of people died. Will these 3D printed structures or homes be able to withstand the winds, the winds from these hurricanes? Not to mention, if you go into the tornado alley in certain parts of the country, will these homes be able to withstand these tornadoes as well? I mean, even the regular homes can't withstand, you know what I'm saying? But it will be interesting to see how they test these as well. If anything, the bigger risk is cities actually, and developers clinging to old habits while waiting for everything to be perfect before they adopt. Says robotic construction won't erase the housing crisis overnight, says an economist. But if a robot can print the structure in a day, 24 hours, that's weeks of schedule to get back on every single build. Multiply that by 1,000 homes, and suddenly you're not chasing demand. You're starting to catch up. And I think once they, nail everything down and perfect the technology, this will help with the housing crisis, right? But will it help with the labor shortage? Once, there's always a trade-off, right? You're going to have a lot of guys in the trades, masons and, the bricklayers and all of that. They're going to be out of work, right? At least in some parts. That's why, once again, guys, if you're not educating yourself or leveling up as far as your skills, right, you can't wait for technology to overtake you. You have to look at it and say, oh, that's coming to catch up to me. What am I doing, right? What am I doing to put myself in a position where I won't be ran over by this technology and I'm sitting there and I can't feed my family? So I would say being a bricklayer or somebody who deals with concrete, a matter of fact, let that go by. What's going to happen to the concrete companies, right? There's a few out here where I'm at. I think one's called Robinson Ready Mix and places like that with the concrete trucks and all that. How's that going to affect them, right? I wonder if they're looking at it and looking at the writing on the walls and saying, hey, look, this is a possible threat to what we're doing. Maybe we need to, pivot and see how we can either get in the game or invest in these companies that are already, that are printing these houses, and at least won't be ran over that way, right? So that's what you got to look at when you're in business. You always have to look at who is coming up behind us with something that could wipe us out. How can we join them, right? If you can't beat them, join them. Or, how can we, what can we do here? So that'll be interesting to see if this thing gets widespread. Now, I used to install solar panels, and back in the day, solar panels weren't considered, they were just considered renewable energy that wasn't going to take over, and it had a lot of enemies, right? You have the oil industry, you have a lot of non-renewable sources, resources like oil, like crude oil. That's why they're going over to other countries and stealing their oil, or taking their oil, whatever, commandeering it, right? Is that the word, commandeering it? And so you have these big oil companies they're looking at all this stuff, and they're saying, no, we can't allow the renewables to take over what we have here that we have built for centuries, right? So are you going to have big concrete companies or construction companies that are going to lobby on Capitol Hill to stop this? I don't know, but I don't want to move into that territory, but you get where I'm going with that, okay? Says the speed of wall construction cuts projects and timelines dramatically, okay? Lower labor intensity can help in regions where skilled workers are scarce, right? Makes sense. Standardized processes can reduce errors and rework on site. Potential cost savings free up budgets for better insulation or finishes. Scaling up could open the door to more affordable starter homes and social housing, right? That's what that's the good thing about this. When you have tech that can move this fast, you're talking about helping a lot of displaced people around the world, whether it's in this country or not, getting out of the elements, off the streets, into shelter, housing and shelter. And that's, I can say that. So it doesn't really even have to be as sturdy for things like that. But, that's a good thing about it. Will this actually fix the housing crisis? Let's see what they're saying about that. It says, step back from the tech and you're left with a more human story. Families squeezed into overpriced rentals. Okay, young people saving for years just to be outbid on their first offer, right? We're talking about homes, right? These young families, older residents watching their kids, move far away because there's nothing affordable nearby. Against that backdrop, a robot quietly printing a house in 24 hours starts to feel like less a gimmick and more like a practical tool, not a silver bullet, but a power tool. All right. Experts are blunt. If cities don't change zoning, financing, and planning rules, no machine can build fast enough to solve the deeper supply crunch. So it's saying here that, these robots can affect the housing, or can have a somewhat positive impact on the housing shortage. But the deeper problem, right, is these things in the bureaucratic side of things, zoning, financing, planning. Who's in charge of all of those? Why are those so problematic where people can't afford homes? Why is that, right? Still, something has shifted. It says housing once felt like a slow, immovable sector, allergic to change. Now mayors of cities are touring these printed neighborhoods, these 3D printed neighborhoods. Investors are funding new factories, and building codes are being rewritten to include 3D printed walls, right? So it's even changing the building codes. The conversation has moved from, is this real, to how fast can we scale without messing it up? People who never thought about concrete mixes now ask whether robotic homes can be adapted to dense cities, to cold climates, and to flood zones. There's a quiet sense that if this works, this way we imagine starter homes and public housing could look very different in 10 years, right? Okay. So, I'm thinking about low income areas, right? What is that going to look like, right? But that's that. Now it's not even about the robotic homes. This is about, why do you have low income areas like projects anyway, right? But I'm sure, you know, maybe they're going to start there first, right, to do the experimentation, because low income areas, right, low income communities are always the guinea pigs for this stuff. So don't be surprised if you driving down South Central somewhere and you see a robotic arm or a robot building a structure somewhere there to test. For now, most of us will still live in houses built the old-fashioned way. Yet the sight of a robot raising full-size walls overnight is hard to unsee. It challenges the assumptions that homes must always take months or years, and that delays and overspending are just how it goes. As more pilot projects turn into full neighborhoods, the question won't be whether robots can build a house in 24 hours. The real question will be who gets access to those faster, potentially cheaper homes, and who gets left in yesterday's market. No doubt, low-income people will be left, unless there are subsidies to help them get into these homes, and it will be for experimentation as well. And you have to consider what are going to be in these homes to make them safe. Back in the day, they used to have asbestos all over the place. They took that out. Is this new type of concrete, right, that's being spit out or extruded from these robots, is it safe? What is the exact ingredients? Do they exude some kind of biohazard over time? I didn't see anything about that in this article. But these are the things we got to think about, okay? The story of robot building houses is just the beginning. All right, so here's a breakdown. It says robots can print a home's walls in 24 hours, right? Large 3D printers extrude fast-setting concrete layer by layer on site. It gives a concrete sense of how quickly housing supply could expand. Hybrid builds keep humans in the loop. Robots handle the structure, and then crews handle the roofs, windows, systems, and finishes. Those systems being electrical, plumbing, everything a house needs, right? HVAC and all that stuff. You guys still have work to do, okay? The robots haven't taken that over yet. The robot's not going to climb or are not going to install an HVAC system, at least not yet. The robot's not going to install the windows, at least not yet. Plumbing, it's not going to install that. But I guarantee you guys, don't be surprised. 5 years from now, one of those trades may be overtaken by tech, by robots. Okay, potential to ease the housing process. Okay, housing shortage. I'm sorry. Faster, more predictable bills can lower costs and boost annual housing output. All right, so there you go with that. So let's see. All right, guys, that's it. Hope you guys got something out of that. Keep your eyes open, see what's going on out there in the world as far as tech, as far as the trades, and how AI and automation is affecting all of this. Take care. Have a good one.